So, it's a proper treat to speak to you. How are you? Are you feeling top of the world? Sort of second to top of the
Second,
world,
second
but
top of the world. Yeah, nobody can claim the peak from the juggernaut that is Taylor Swift.
yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, no, I mean it was a remarkable week last week. You know, we worked very hard to try and get the album as high as it could be. Um, we worked very hard to make the best album we possibly could. You know, we promised ourselves when we reformed that if we were going to dare to be stupid enough to make new music, that it better be bloody good. You never know how people are going to respond to it, but I think if you take a lot of time to craft your idea into the best reflection of your thoughts that you can possibly get, so it's mirroring it as well as you can make it, then it stands a good chance of being well received and you made it for the right reasons, not just because you need a new fucking logo on next year's tour t-shirt.
yeah, yeah. There are good bands that do that as well, though. I feel like, and I noticed that Pet Shop Boys had just announced a tour for next year, and they'd tweaked a load of their imagery, and they managed to make good music and shift some merch, as they say.
No, when what I meant really was, it's just like you don't have any new ideas, but your manager says you've got to come up with some reason to tour again, so you better chuck out any old shit just to rebrand it.
Well, it is interesting with your band in that I was thinking that you've been back longer than the first window of your existence now.
That's true. Yeah, 17 years as opposed to whatever it was first time around 12.
Yeah, and it's so amazing to me that I don't think that the influence of OMD can be understated, but it's so amazing to me that to have a record of new songs that chart at number two, and let's just say, obviously, the very glamorous elephant in the room being Taylor Swift, it is basically a number one record. That you never fell into that trap of going out in a package tour with other bands from the 80s and therefore maintain your status as artists. Was there ever a time where you had been offered those kind of tours, and how did you feel about that, and was it a decision to not go that way?
I think when we reformed, we wanted to reclaim standalone territory, and it was important for us to do our own tours and to make at least one new album, which was History of Modern. We kept bumping into old friends from way back who said, "Why don't you do Rewind? Why are you not doing this right?" And actually, actually, James, we did decide to actually do some of the retro festivals. We have done Rewind, we have done Let's Rock, um, because actually it's been frustrating over the years. In some respects, we're kind of like a secret band. People who've seen us play live almost invariably come back because we put on a very good show and we kick ass and we've got lots of hits that people like to hear live and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
play them as people remember them. But a lot of people go, "Oh, OMD, yeah, well, I used to like the songs, but are they any good live?" And then you go out there and you play to 15,000 people who maybe hadn't bought a ticket to see you, and they all go, "Fuck, I had no idea they were any good. Why didn't somebody tell me 30 years ago they were so good on stage?" And so we actually did the nostalgia gigs to expand our audience because we were tired of people not know. I sound very egotistical, but I do believe that we have a very good vision of our own self-editing capabilities. We know when we're good and we know when we're bad, and we refuse to be bad.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that people would say that though, because given that you were so enthralled to Kraftwerk before you got together, you were almost like the the mirror, the energetic kind of shadow realm version of Kraftwerk, in that you presented your music as rock music. Really, like you see footage of the beginning, and it's a band. It rocks, right? Like your bass is very high in the mix, and also everyone knows that you dance like a geography teacher that's had a couple of drinks at the staff do. Like there's always been something to look at. Like it's not static music. So I'm surprised that people would question whether you were any good live.
I mean, obviously, when we first started out, there was an element of me wanting to disprove that electronic music was all po-faced and pseudo-intellectual and robotic. So I did just start dancing in my own idiosyncratic way, which wasn't hugely dissimilar to Ian Curtis actually in the early days.
Right, okay.
Paul likes to say that I've spent 45 years overcompensating for his static performance, which is quite a good line.
No, but I also just think though, I think it's very different to Ian Curtis. I mean, I know it became something else, but there's something quite joyous about it. Like with Ian Curtis, it's quite, for lots of reasons, it's quite intimidating, But with you, it's like, well, hey, that's how I see it anyway.
You know what? I describe it as my shamanistic trance. I like the physicality of it. I go into. I mean, it releases all kinds of endorphins by the time I come off stage, and for an hour after I come off stage, I'm mentally and physically absolutely in another place. It's a beautiful, floating, fabulous place, and it's part of the whole performance. So it's actually it's good for me. I hate watching myself back on stage. I look like a fucking twat, but I can't help it, and it
I
seems to
don't think
make
you do.
sense in the moment.
No, I think it's something to be. I think it's something to be very proud of. I think it's
Oh, thank you.
it's part of your toolbox. That said, though, me saying that there's something so joyous about it, having spent a fair amount of time with Bauhaus Staircase now, it feels like this is like lyrically, like in terms of the subject matter, it feels like it's a bit of a treatise on the horror show that is the modern age. Have I got that right?
I think that it's definitely reflecting upon my personal experiences and my perception of my interaction with other people and their personal experiences, particularly in the last 3 years. I think as I start to analyze, I wasn't consciously analyzing it. There was no intentional overriding theme lyrically. But if I'm now analyzing it kind of postpartum, as you always have to do in interviews, I think there was two extremes of feeling. That there was a lot of the anger that was in me for, well, I mean, obviously kleptocracy is reflecting my anger with, like, I was so furious about Brexit. I believe in democracy, but I hate the fact that these narcissists have just stolen it from us, and people who should know better are voting for them. The very people who vote for them are the people who are going to be most damaged by them because they don't give a fuck about you. And
Yeah.
yet they're snake oil salesmen who charlatans who just seem to manage to convince people to do stupid things. So that was there. Obviously, sitting at home in a pandemic, and I'd wanted to write a song called Anthropocene for some time. It seemed like the appropriate time to reflect upon Homo sapiens' place in the world and whether we had a future. Same with evolution. I mean, I've been trying to write Evolution of Species for 12 years. So that one finally came together. But the flip side of that, James, is that we also rediscovered in the pandemic that we could be very caring and empathetic creatures, and people reached out to friends and family, and there was a lot more, can I take you to the hospital, or do you need anything from the shops, and are you lonely, shall I come round for a cuppa, or even if we have to talk through the window, and I think there's an element of that in the songs. I mean, there's 3 songs on the album that were specifically written as musical hugs by me to other people, as gifts. And then I had to go back around and say, that song I gave you, can I have it back for our album, please? Do you mind?
Really?
Oh, yeah. And basically they said, well, all right then, as long as you don't tell anybody who they're for. So they have to remain anonymous.
That is lovely, though.
Yeah, no, they were written for people that I cared about, and 2 of whom who were struggling a bit, and it was just like my kind of like, I love you, I know this is shit, but let's stick together and we'll get through this. So
It was interesting, the pandemic. Interesting is one word, obviously.
Yeah.
There's many words I could use, but it really was kind of the best of times and the worst of times, I think, in so many ways,
Mm.
depending on, your own sense of tragedy or whatever. But I think that, I think it's interesting with your band. I mean, you know, not wanting to make you feel old, but I'm not even born when you start out. And I guess that when as a student of music and culture, I guess that I always think about that era as being quite austere and uh, not great times, right? Like Thatcher,
Mhm.
Cold War.
Mhm.
So you're probably better placed than me to actually look at the modern age and com- like, am I exaggerating that these times seem as strange as they are, or I mean, was the '80s better?
It's all relative. I mean, these are your strange times, and there are bad things happening and problems in the world.
Yeah, but I mean, nothing bad happened
I'm
in the '90s though. The '90s was amazing.
Oh yeah, well yeah, and you grew up through the boom of the late '80s through the '90s.
Yeah, I feel like I
I,
was duped.
You were. It was a little. It's like what we're in now. The particular era we've got in the last 10,000 years. We're just between two ice ages. They'll be back. We'll be fucked. Don't worry about it. You know. Um, I was born. I mean, listen. People talk to me. Oh, it's terrible now. And I said, listen. I didn't think I'd see major armed conflict in Europe again in my lifetime. That hurts. The Israeli-Palestine situation remains unresolved, and it's just blown up again, and it's going to keep blowing up. But you know what? And we just went through a pandemic, and 20 million people died, which is horrific. However, we didn't go through the Black Death, which killed 50% of European and Asian population. It is not 1940, you know? So
Yeah,
I think if you look, I mean, I'm always looking at the bigger picture because I think it's too easy to immerse yourself in the pain and go, "Oh, the world's terrible, the world's shit." If I study history, and history does teach you that, for the most part, the world is actually better, even though there's nearly 8 billion of us. That population is going to stop this century. We are medicating ourselves. We have better medicine. We are able to feed ourselves. There's more education. The population rate is falling. I mean, there's lots of things that are improving in this world, but yes, there are still glaring problems.
I mean, I'm fascinated by history as well. I always think, like, I'm 43 now, and I did history at school, and I did it
Mhm.
to A level, and I really enjoyed history. But I always think that it wasn't really till I got to my 30s where I almost wish I could take my history A level again, like when I was 30, because I would have done a lot better. Because I just think the older you get, the more interested you get in history. But
Yeah,
I'm also
more
super,
perspective.
yeah, totally. But I'm also interested in um, philosophy and psychology, and I guess that my worries about where we're at is it feels like something. You're right. Like on paper, we're living in the best times for the human race in terms of the illnesses that we can cure and so on. But it feels like psychologically something has gone wrong with us. Like it feels like there is a feel.
We've been sold down the fucking river by um, undeliverable desires. I mean, listen, the last album was called The Punishment of Luxury, and I spent a lot of time talking about that. It's like, you know, we have been sold a vision of life which is unrealistic and unsustainable. You are not worthy of love or self-respect if your TV isn't 2 fucking meters wide, if you don't have a new car, if your wife isn't the hottest wife on the street, if your kids don't have the latest Xbox and 300 quid trainers. We are living in this kind of consumer driven, completely la la land, and I don't want to diminish mental health issues, but mental health issues occur in first world countries. If you live somewhere where you spend 16 hours a day trying to fucking feed your family and worry about a tornado or some wild animal eating your smallest child or some fucking army invading your country and wiping you all out, you don't have time for a mental health problem. You're just fucking surviving.
Yeah, no, I do. I know what you're saying. I should say, just because I talk about it on almost every episode, I have OCD, and it's very crippling for me. But even the people I know within that community of people who suffer with that illness and other kind of related disorders, there is a lot of, like, the approach to mental health that we were raised with was one of stoicism and strength. And sometimes I see the discourse about mental health and I go, there are people who've got it much worse than you, and that should be part of what pushes you on to get better. So,
I'm not diminishing the issues with mental health. I mean, I know several people with OCD. I was in love with somebody who had borderline personality disorder, and it was the most painful thing that I've ever had to see her endure, and I endured with her. I'm not diminishing the pain, but the same token, I have no truck in religion. The only tenet of any religion I appreciate is the Buddhist one, which is the worst pain you can feel is the pain you inflict upon yourself. And by living in psychological time, where you regret the past and fear the future, rather than trying to live in the now. But again, easier said than done.
Yeah, the only reason I flagged OCD is because otherwise people who listen to this podcast every week would be like, you let Andy talk about mental health and you didn't mention OCD. So that's the only reason I brought it up, to be honest. Do you feel like OMD get the credit they deserve?
I saw this one marching across the horizon as soon as you opened your mouth.
Yeah.
Do you know what?
Why did you think that was coming?
Because it's just the tone you said. Do you think? If I say no, I sound like some conceited whinge bag.
Yeah, but you've said that a couple of times while we've been talking, but that's not how you come across. Like, I've watched the documentaries, I've watched so many interviews that you've done. You come across as a good bloke. Like, you don't come across as pompous at all. So I think, with that in mind, you can be honest.
When we first started out, I think we had kind of imposter syndrome. We were the two hairy lads from the wrong side of the river who went to Eric's, who were the least likely to make it. And yet here we are now, 45 years later. We've always been honest about our creative process. Nobody works in a vacuum, and I think that people who pretend like they invented something, miraculous out of their head with no influence are doing every other artist a disfavor. We work as hard as we can to make things the best that we can. In the end, when you're creating something, you're having a conversation with yourself. You're trying to speak back to yourself in the clearest possible reflecting language that you can. And if you pull out of yourself your strongest feelings and ideas, and you can sculpt it and sculpt it and sculpt it, sometimes it takes a day and sometimes it takes years, but if you get it to a point where it's resonating and it's talking back to you and you're going, this is talking to me. I can hear it. It's exactly right. You hope then, and we have learned over the years, if we manage to do that, if we have the time to edit properly and trust our judgments, we tend to resonate strongly with other people. When we've tried to write something because we needed a hit rather than something that we was trying to talk to us with, it tends to be less successful. I mean, being in the band now, we have spent years feeling like we got slagged off for no reason, or we were copying somebody, or you're just this or you're just that. But now, 45 years later, it's actually quite cool to be in Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. We're no longer swimming against the tide. most people say nice things about us. We were influential. We were iconic. We were, we were at the crest of a new wave of popularizing synthesizer stroke intelligent lyric music. I like that, and I don't want that to stop. So I will take it. I think we're getting credit for all the hard work we've done. But you know what? There's plenty of other people put in immense hard work, being incredible lecturers in universities or doctors or working down a fucking coal mine. Do they get the credit they deserve?
No, totally. So it is almost that. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think though that I don't know. I almost feel like the reasons why you were maybe critiqued in the beginning, or the reasons why people maybe thought you were uncool, is actually maybe one of the reasons why you're still around and, dare I say it, beloved. Like it wasn't like you just seem like nice people. Like I don't know whether that's like
Nice guys don't always finish first, especially when Taylor Swift's in the chart. But no, you know what? Thank you, James. I mean, we've always tried to be very honest. We've always tried to explain what we're trying to do. We always wanted to do. I always wanted lyrics that I thought were more interesting than just the stereotypical lyrics of the 70s. That was a big aim of OMD. I mean, it was a hobby that got out of hand. We were never expected to do this, Yeah. I was going to go to Leeds Poly and do fine art. Paul was going to go and become an electronics engineer. And this band started, and we never went back to follow our original plans. But I allow myself now to look back at our career and go, you have got a catalogue of work which is very strong. It's interesting. You did something new and you wrote some fucking great melodies which people can still sing along to. And I give ourselves credit for that. And I do like to think that, yeah, we also did something that was more interesting, that wasn't just churning out the same old. And even with the new album, we sound like orchestral maneuvers in the dark. Why would we not? But we're not just churning out some third-rate pastiche of ourselves, I hope.
Do you know what my favourite OMD record is?
Go on.
It's Dazzle Ships.
Good man.
Which is 30 years old. 40 years old? 40 years old this year. How do you feel about the record now? And has me saying it's my favourite OMD record, does that make up for the fact that loads of people were idiots and didn't understand it at the time?
I look back now and I can see why it struggled. I think it was definitely just more than 15 minutes ahead of the fashion, as Wall would have said. It was fractured. Now we live in a world where we've got the phone on, we've got the TV on, we're looking at the laptop. There's somebody's talking to. We can juggle all these sort of like multitasks, but at the time I think it was a little bit fractured. It was overtly political because I think I took to heart what some journalists were saying. It's like, you said you wanted to change the world with your music. How are you doing that writing songs about fucking Joan of Arc? To be honest, how I actually thought I was going to change the world with music. It's the beautiful naivety of youth, isn't it? I'm going to change the world by writing songs about oil refineries instead of "Ooh, baby, I love you."
Do you know what? Do you know what? I've written a book recently about my career as a music journalist and having OCD, and there's a bit in it, like I revisited loads of growing up, and there's a bit in it where I'm sort of telling people I'm going to change the world, like almost like I think I can do this via my writing. Mm-hmm. And when I look back, I go, well, I know you thought that, but you didn't actually do a lot to change the world. You just wrote a lot of things. Like, it's kind of weird, isn't it? It's like, it's something that young people think, often young men think, and actually, well, what are we really changing? It's almost like it's enough if you change some lives, but the world, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that young creative men kind of get a little bit sort of carried away with themselves and think that somehow they're going to be some mixture of kind of Oscar Wilde or Tolstoy or fucking I don't know. Just pick any radical artist who you might aspire to. It most creative processes don't deal hammer blows to the culture in which they find themselves, but they can have some influence by reflecting it, whether it be a song about a circumstance that makes people crystallize their thoughts, whether it be a review or a written piece that brings to broader attention something that you as a journalist feel is worthy of repeating or spreading the news. So it does, I'm sure you've had experiences where somebody does come up to you and says, something that you did, by the way, really resonated with me, and I still carry it because and then you go, okay, I've just been blessed. Somebody shared something beautiful with me that I did put something in their life that they cherish.
Well, that's me telling you what a corker of a record Dazzle Ships is. So,
Well, thank you.
You said something. I can't remember when you said it, but you said that you thought that the next record might be your last record. I mean, that's a stupid idea. Why would you do that?
It's again, I don't work down a fucking coal mine. All right, I'm not driving a bloody truck across country for 48 hours a day. It's not a hard job, but trying to, if you want to make something beautiful and powerful, trying to mine your soul and your head and your heart for the very best stuff you can get to make music. Again, I'm sounding pretentious and conceited again, but I don't want to make music that I'm embarrassed by, or they look back on and go, "Oh, why did you let that go out? It wasn't as good as it could have been." It's hard. After 45 years, it's hard to come up with something you haven't said before. It's hard to come up with a new. I mean, the hardest thing is to get a lyric with a great melody. Doing the music is okay, but it's very hard. And also, I've now got a problem, which is, without saying the wrong thing, Paul now has several other priorities in his life, and he's been an incredible ally with me. I can do a lot of it on my own, but it's better with him.
Yeah.
And I'm finding it harder and harder to get his attention because he's got, understandably, and he's 8 months younger than me, and he's always had a life out of the creative process. I'm the sad fucker who hasn't. I mean, I've joked with people. I said, I sat in my programming room and made an album during COVID. Paul bought a villa in France and made a baby. Which one of us is stupid?
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I feel like I don't need to think I'm a journalist. I pry, right? It's what I do. But do you find real life hard?
No. I don't know. I mean, I can switch it on and off. It's just that I do love. It is such a buzz when you make something and it's come from it's like you've manufactured it out of the ether and your own thoughts, and then there it is coming out the speakers, and it's like, wow, we made that wow, and it talks to us, and we resonate with it. That's a buzz, and I like doing it, but I find 9 times out of 10 what you think is a good idea doesn't work. It's not all gold. You must know this. It's not all gold, and you have to be a ruthless editor.
Yeah, you say that though, but I was watching that souvenir film, that little documentary when you go into Berlin and you sat at the desk and you're basically kind of bringing parts in and out. And I've very rarely seen songwriters that are so enthused, almost like nerdy about that process, but also so into mistakes, happy accidents. Like there's a ton of bits, like the the drum fill coming in too early on Enola Gay, and I mean
you do know your shit, don't you?
I mean, you're almost like cock a hoop at that, and it was so amazing to see. So you know that. I mean, I'm going to throw it back at you, but all the good stuff comes from trying to do something, getting it wrong, and it being your own.
uh, some good stuff comes from getting it wrong, and then you go, hang on a minute, this wasn't what I intended, but is it actually even better than what I intended? And that does happen, and you have to be prepared to embrace it and not get locked into your original vision. I don't honestly know what's going to happen. I don't know. I do feel that this album, most of these songs were sitting in the computer in one form or another before lockdown happened. And it was only because there was fuck all else to do that I went out into the programming room and decided, well, I'm gonna go and put some energy into these, precisely because prior to lockdown I was too busy, going, I'm in my 60s now, I want to smell the roses that I've planted over the last 40 odd years. And then I couldn't go out and smell the roses. So I went, all right, fuck it. I better finish these songs. That's the only thing to do.
Yeah, you're like, how old are you?
64.
Yeah, I mean, 64 is not old anyway, anymore. But you're the least 64-year-old man I think I've ever met. The least 64-year-old man.
Do you know what? Thank you. I'll take those compliments. One of the things that we're getting feedback on the album is people say, you sound like you're in your 20s. You sound like you care. You still sound like you've got the energy of a young man. You're not just going, oh, well, I'm going to sing with the knowledge of time, and I'm a bit tired and old, and I'm a bit bored, but I can still write something that might work. No, when I get passionate, I get very excited and animated. Yes.
I've seen the live videos. I've never seen you play live before. When can that happen? When are you playing London?
We're playing the O2 at the end, towards the end of March, but we're not playing it because everybody goes, "Oh, not that fucking." I'm sorry, no, we're playing it we've got the top shut down. We don't want to play the giant aircraft hangar. Right. We're playing to 8,000. It's just because we're in this weird place now where we're kind of too big for theaters, but a lot of the arenas were not quite going to sell out, so we're trying to sort of manufacture a middle ground. But yeah, we're doing the O2 towards the end of March. And
I'm absolutely 100% there. I won't hear.
But the funny thing is we're going to have a nostalgia fest there because for one night only, we've got Howard Jones supporting us as a 40th celebration of the fact that he supported us in 1983, just before New Song came out and was his first hit. So
I'll allow it.
For the rest of the tour, however, we've got Walt Disco playing with us.
Nice.
Who are fucking amazing. You know Walt Disco?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to seeing those guys playing with us. Yeah, so it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm on for the O2. It's 4 stops from my house, and you can get pick and mix in there. So it's not for everyone, but those two things do appeal to me, and it always sounds amazing as well. I did read that you were talking about maybe doing a kind of record of collaborations, basically, and that made me really excited because I think that there are so many amazing contemporary names that champion your music or talk about how important it is to them. That feels to me like a really amazing thing. Do you think that will happen?
We'll see. I've got, it's a bit like being an artist, and in the corner of the studio, you've got canvases stacked up that you go well, that didn't work for this year's exhibition, but I might find another use for it. Or I like the background, but I didn't get the foreground right. So you've always got things you're working on, or could be worked on. I personally have about 4 songs that are sitting around that I think are great songs that kind of don't necessarily sound like they fit an OMD album. And Paul himself might go a bit like, that's a bit too far away from where we perhaps should be. So yeah, that's a serious possibility. It might just be a kind of EP or something, but I have. Yeah, you're right. You've heard that right. I must have talked about it. I've got a few interesting songs up my sleeve that I'd quite like to do with a few people, and I know who I want to ask.
Yeah, make that happen.
Okay.
And do lots more records. I'll be cross if you don't.
Well, that's me told. No, listen. I have another little idea, which because I struggle to do the top line lyrics. I quite like the idea of doing a very kind of Eno-esque melancholy album. Not quite like how Vince Clarke just did his, but I just I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I'll stop creating. I just don't honestly know if Paul and I can find a way to make a full OMD album. Who knows? But just now it feels like, I'm an empty husk because that's all I could do out of what I had. But I like the fact that we seem to have made a record that after 45 years, people are saying is, well, could you do any better if you were 21?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's in the top 3 OMD records, unquestionably, and I think
Thank
that's
you very much.
such an amazing achievement after so much time. Thanks so much for your time, man. I should wrap up. I feel like I've kept you. I feel like I've kept you a bit longer than I said I would, but thank
No,
you.
no. Listen, I've enjoyed our conversation, and I think we could probably talk for several more hours, and
Yeah, me
you'd
too.
have a multiple edition podcast.
Yeah,
But,
me too. I mean, I do
um,
know. I mean, I know the 100% guys quite well, so
mhm,
it may well be that when we're in the Millennium Dome, that somehow we cross paths in a corridor or something. And in which case, I will say
mhm.
hello for sure.
Okay. No, it's been nice to talk to you. I mean, we're stuck in the middle of bloody nowhere in Germany for 4 days, actually doing a TV show that's broadcast on New Year's Eve. So,
Mm.
and it just, yeah, I feel like I'm in a beautiful village that's somewhere on the outskirts of Shrewsbury or something. It doesn't feel like I'm doing a TV show in an arena tomorrow. But, we're in the middle of bloody nowhere. It's like the Twilight Zone here, actually.
Yeah,
But
I've suddenly had visions of like The Prisoner or something. You know?
yeah, no, it is. It's quite funny actually. All week we were talking about, oh, we're going to be number 3, we're going to be number 2. And I just kept saying, I am not a number, I am a free man.
Oh no.
Anyway, but no, listen, great questions, and thank you. And yeah, I mean, what I feel resonated there was that you have a perception of me, which I think is quite. I like the perception you have of me because I think you get my energy, you get my passion, you get the fact that I care.
Yeah, absolutely. You're the man, dude.
Thank you very
I
much.
will speak to you again. Thanks so much for your
All
time,
right.
man, and
Cheers now.
enjoy Germany. See
Thank
ya.
you.
Bye, bye,
Bye.
bye.